I do want to start with the Flyers because I've noticed that you work for the station that doesn't have the rights to the team, and yet you're actively talking about the team more than the station that does have the rights to the team, which I always find funny. First of all, how have you not gotten fired for talking about the Flyers on WIP? And how are you feeling with about 20-ish games left in the season, very clearly a team that is going nowhere fast other than, hopefully, some good luck in the draft lottery?
Yeah, so I haven't had a chance yet to see my boss since opening up my Friday evening show with the Flyers trade deadline. So we'll see what happens. Although, all jokes aside, they do love it. They do appreciate the fact that there is someone who could bring that ability to the airwaves. And truth be told, I had 8 hours Friday and Saturday on the air. 6 hours of that was Flyers calls nonstop. Like people were talking about. And then the next day, Saturday, Al Morganti was on. And the same producer who I had was producing Al Morganti with Tom Kelly. And he goes, dude, it's not stopping. It just keeps coming in. And it's like, that's great. They're talkable. So when it comes to the 20 games left, all right. So step one of the rebuild seems to be in place here, which is evaluate, get rid of the Farabees, get rid of the Frost. I still think there's some evaluation going with the Cam Yorks of the world. So there still is some evaluation going, but they stripped it down. They got 7 draft picks in the first 2 rounds of this upcoming draft. They did get a first for Lawton, which is pushed back a couple years, but this was what they told us they were going to do. They were really going to strip this down. Now it comes down to execution, which is probably the more difficult part. But Danny Briere, this is what bothers me over the long haul here of the Flyers is it's always old school guys, Homer, and then, we have Bobby Clark, and then it's Ron Hextall. I can't do this. And then you finally go to Chuck Fletcher, who's outside, and that sucked more than the people who were actually here. So then you go back to Danny Briere, and everyone goes, oh, it's another old school Flyer. But I respect his journey more to get here. He was intriguing with the Canadians. Maybe he would have got hired by the Habs. It seemed like he did the work to earn the job. So because of that, I'm not just tied to the old school Flyers. I'm actually willing to give him more of like an open opportunity here to swing me. So I have faith in who's in charge. I have faith in Danny Briere and Keith Jones. It seems like they know what they need. They stress a 1D. They stress a 1C. If I got guys up there who aren't stressing the importance of those 2 positions, then I'd probably have more worry. They know what they need to be successful. So it just comes down to execution. But it seems like the path is there. They just got to actually knock it out of the park. Your thoughts?
Well, the interesting thing is, it's a difference between recognizing that they need those guys and then doing the Chuck Fletcher thing, which was effectively lie about those guys. Because if Chuck Fletcher were still here, make no mistake about it, this team would probably be trying to sell you on the belief that Sean Couturier is going to get healthy and return to being a 1C Selke finalist, and they would still continue to try to force this issue. They probably wouldn't have traded Ivan Provorov, and in that case, they would have tried to convince you once again that Provorov is going to be that number 1D. Chuck would probably come up with some bullshit model to show you that he is in fact a 1D when he wasn't. I agree with you. It's interesting because they very clearly understand that the talent isn't here. And I've had plenty of opportunities now to have conversations with those guys, whether on the show or off of it. And I feel significantly better with where they are at now versus where they were in January. Because in January, you and I would kind of go back and forth about this in text, but you kind of looked at it like, all right, you can't tell these guys to lose, which I think is fair. But I looked at it all along, the path here is clear. You need another Mishkov level prospect, and the only way to do it is through the draft. And so, I feel significantly better now, I guess, that Farabee's gone, Frost is gone. They haven't really gone on to blossom yet in Calgary. They still may, who knows? But, those guys are gone. Kuzmenko, you were able to flip for a third-round pick. And Scott Lawton, for 18 months, it was like Lawton is fetching you a high-pick offer. And it was interesting. Over on Press Row Show last weekend, we asked Danny about it. Did you ever have an offer that was close to the one that you got for Lawton, which, of course, brought back a first-round pick in 2027 in Grebenkin, who's forecheck, backcheck, paycheck. We like him. And he said, yeah, we've gotten offers similar before, but maybe the timing wasn't right. Which makes me, on one hand, I kind of want my head to explode because there have been things floated out there that there might have been a first-round pick in play in the past. But they ultimately held on to Lawton. They got him dealt. They lowered the ceiling, lowered the floor, the same shit I've been saying all year. And like they very much appear to be on their way to, if not the annual 10-game losing streak, to a few losing streaks here that hopefully gives them the chance to draft in that top 4, top 5, and like maybe get another good player. So where would you say your confidence level is in the Flyers right now? If we had to go on a scale of, I don't know, do you want to go 1 to 5? Do you want to go like the star ratings? Do you want to go 1 to 10 so you have a little bit more variance? Well, let's go 1 to 10. 1 to 10 gives you a little bit more nuance. You can even use decimals or you can use fractions if you want. Where are you at right now, confidence-wise, in the Danny Briere, Keith Jones duo with their vision of where the team is now and where it's heading?
I would say 7.5.
Ooh.
And I want to say 8, but I think 8 would be a little too much. But 7.5 might not be 7.75. I'm in that rate. I do. Okay. Here's my worry. I know they're so obsessed with 1C that I really hope they don't do something stupid like go after Pettersson. I don't want them to get so obsessed. And Danny Briere did say that, you know, hey, maybe the timeline has accelerated a little bit quicker because they got Mitchkov over earlier. And so maybe they're into this decision-making sooner rather than later. And that man's not a 1C. So that's one thing that I am nervous about is being so obsessed with it that you end up making a knee-jerk reaction move. Although they do seem to be more patient than not. I think that's Danny Briere's MO as I'm starting to learn about who he is as a GM. He does seem to be patient, which may end up benefiting you, or it can bite you in the ass sometimes too. Now that you're in the next wave of this, you got to be able to thread the needle. You know what I mean? You can't, when you're selling off assets, it's easier to just be patient and sell off at deadlines. But now that you're in that space where you got to kind of be aggressive and get cute and get creative, there's less time to wait or else maybe you miss out on something. So that's where I wonder if Danny Briere is ready for that next step, which is threading the needle. But I'd say 7.5 is where I'm at. Is that fair?
I think it's fair. I'm going to go 8.2, but I'm going to tell you why. Okay? I am not a corporate shill, nor have I ever credibly been accused of being a corporate shill. But I look at the deadline they had, and I start to think about how do you go out and get that 1C? And it could be through free agency, it could be through a trade. How do you ultimately forge the relationships with players that make this place a destination again? And I look at 2 of the moves they made. Lawton had a horrible tragedy in the family. His father-in-law suddenly passed away. Where do the Flyers ultimately send him? Well, they send him to a place to give them a great package back, but they send him to his hometown in Toronto, which is huge. And a move that went very under the radar at the deadline was sending Erik Johnson back to Colorado. And like on the surface, you go, Erik Johnson, you're 7D. Why do you care? Giovanni Smith, like nobody cares. That is a move where you send a guy back to the team where he spent most of his career. That's a guy that you send back to the team that he wants to do anything he can to help that team win another Stanley Cup. It's a good human thing to do because Erik Johnson wasn't going to play here. He's been a good soldier. Danny talked about it post-deadline, that he was a good soldier, and they're just trying to do right by the player. That kind of stuff might not get a player like a Mikko Rantanen, who said there were only 4 teams that he wanted to play for, right? And like that whole debacle with Carolina. It might not get a guy like a Mikko Rantanen to say, you know what, I saw what they did with Erik Johnson, so make them team number 5. But it might be one of those very small things that helps you get a second-tier piece to consider your team or to get a top-tier guy to consider Philadelphia a little bit more strongly. And I think that on aggregate, that's the kind of thing that helps you build this team out. Because this isn't going to be a team that like the entirety of the roster is going to be drafted. Like I think that free agency at some point is going to come into it. And that a trade for a guy that you need to negotiate a deal at the last minute, kind of like what Dallas ended up doing with Rantanen, that ultimately is going to matter. So I'm going to give him an 8.2. If we had talked about this like 3 weeks ago, the number would have been significantly lower, and I would have been once again questioning why the hell Scott Lawton's still on the team. So call it recency bias, but I do think that like I'm more confident in the Flyers now than I have been in a very, very long time. Certainly more confident than at any point when Fletcher Mort was here. So, all right, we're gonna bank that one. That one's a good one.